This isn't some Hollywood drama. This is America, where the harsh truth of homelessness unfolds just steps away from the neon lights and booming skylines. In places like Birmingham, Montgomery, and Huntsville, the crisis plays out quietly but relentlessly. The streets are lined not just with commuters and tourists, but with men, women, and children who have nowhere else to go. They're surviving, day by day, often with nothing more than a tarp or car roof to shield them from the weather. These stories don't make headlines. They don't trend. They unfold quietly, right in front of us, often overlooked by the rush of daily life, but they're real and they're growing. Let's turn our attention to Alabama and the lives of those slipping through the cracks.
Well, I've been staying in my friend's van right now.
In a van?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've been sleeping in his van for right now.
Have you ever slept on the street?
Yeah, I've slept on the streets at parks, wherever, in abandoned houses, wherever.
Homelessness in Alabama isn't some distant or abstract problem. It's here. It's growing. And it touches all walks of life: veterans, families, the elderly, and those who once held steady jobs and stable homes. In 2024, 4,601 people were reported homeless across the state. Nearly half of them were unsheltered, living outdoors, exposed to the elements with nowhere safe to sleep. That number isn't just a statistic. It's made up of real lives, real people, with pasts, with hopes, with stories like James's. James is 62, a Vietnam veteran. He used to work as a mechanic and raise 3 kids in Birmingham. But a mix of job loss, mounting medical bills, and lack of support brought him down a path he never thought he'd walk. Today, he sleeps beneath a highway overpass, clutching a worn backpack that still holds his military medals. What once defined his honor is now tucked away with everything else he owns. His story is not rare. It's just one example of how fast life can turn and how easily someone can fall through the cracks. What makes it harder to ignore is how homelessness lives in contrast to the growth all around it. In cities like Birmingham and Huntsville, the economy is booming. New businesses, construction, rising property values. There's progress in the air, but not everyone is benefiting. The bright lights of urban development cast long shadows, and in those shadows are people living in tents, in crowded shelters, in their cars. People like James. People who once had stability, but now face a daily fight just to make it through the night. We have to ask ourselves, what does it say about us as a society when someone who served their country can't find shelter? What does it mean for families to be locked out of affordable housing while luxury apartments go up across the street? This is about more than just housing. It's about priorities. It's about how we treat the most vulnerable among us. As cities grow upward, too many are being pushed out, left behind. If we don't address the real causes, skyrocketing rents, stagnant wages, mental health gaps, and underfunded services, how many more will end up on the streets? The time to act isn't next year or next election, it's now. Because no one in America, especially not our veterans, our working families, or our neighbors, should be invisible in the country they helped build. Homelessness in Alabama didn't appear out of thin air. It's not the result of a single mistake or a bad decision. It's the outcome of years of systemic failure, policy, neglect, and growing economic pressures that have quietly pushed thousands out of their homes. At the core of this issue is the ever-tightening squeeze on affordable housing. People often think of places like New York or California when they hear about housing shortages, but Alabama isn't immune. In fact, for low-income families and individuals, finding a safe, affordable place to live here has become increasingly difficult. Rents in cities like Montgomery and Birmingham have jumped sharply in the last few years, up by as much as 15% in some neighborhoods. That may not seem drastic at first glance, but when wages remain frozen and living expenses climb across the board, those small increases become deal breakers. For many working families, it becomes a month-to-month gamble. Pay the rent or pay the power bill. Buy groceries or refill prescription. The consequences of that impossible math are clear. More and more people are being priced out of their homes and forced into shelters, cars, or onto the streets. But this crisis isn't just about rising rents. It's about the full cost of living. When food prices rise, transportation costs increase, and medical expenses stack up, all while wages stagnate, the whole system starts to break down. Alabama's minimum wage remains stuck at $7.25 an hour, the federal baseline. Try making ends meet with that paycheck in today's economy. It's not just tough, it's nearly impossible. And when people fall behind, there's little in the way of a safety net to catch them. That's how a family of 4 ends up living in a motel room after just one missed paycheck. That's how a single mom working 2 jobs finds herself sleeping in her car. Beyond economics, there's another major piece of the puzzle: mental health and addiction. A large portion of the homeless population struggles with untreated mental illnesses, addiction, or both. These challenges don't exist in a vacuum. They often go hand in hand with trauma, poverty, and a lack of access to care. And in Alabama, that care is often nowhere to be found. Mental health services in the state are underfunded and overburdened. Long wait lists, a shortage of providers, and a lack of inpatient facilities make it incredibly hard for people to get the help they need. Without treatment, staying employed or housed becomes even more difficult. The cycle continues. And then there's the stigma. Instead of compassion, those experiencing homelessness are often met with judgment. But what most people don't see are the countless small moments that lead someone to the street: a lost job, a medical emergency, a toxic relationship, or a mental health crisis. These aren't lazy people. They're people whose support systems gave out. So, what happens when all of these pressures build up at once? We get the crisis we see today: thousands of Alabamians with nowhere to go and nowhere to turn. And if we don't start addressing the root causes, affordable housing, income inequality, mental health care, then we have to ask, how many more will be added to that number next year? If we keep treating the symptoms while ignoring the disease, we'll never break the cycle. We'll just keep patching up the cracks while more families fall through. Homelessness doesn't just hurt the people who are experiencing it. It ripples outward, touching entire communities in ways that aren't always visible at first glance. In Alabama, the effects can be seen in public health, local economies, and the overall sense of safety and unity within our cities. Let's start with the human impact, the daily reality for someone living without a roof. It's brutal. There's the exposure to extreme weather, the lack of safe sanitation, the constant risk of violence or theft. Over time, these stressors wear people down, both physically and mentally. Anxiety, depression, and PTSD are common, often intensified by the trauma of being unhoused. And without a stable place to sleep or store belongings, even the most basic tasks like getting clean, finding food, or attending a job interview become massive hurdles. And what about health? Homelessness is closely linked to a host of medical issues. Chronic illnesses like asthma, diabetes, and hypertension are harder to manage without proper shelter or nutrition. Infectious diseases spread quickly in overcrowded shelters or encampments without hygiene facilities. Many homeless individuals avoid hospitals until things become emergencies, which leads to more ER visits, longer stays, and higher costs for everyone. Without access to consistent health care, conditions spiral. And while the physical toll is steep, the emotional toll is just as devastating. For many, simply surviving each day becomes the goal. Any thought of long-term recovery fades away. From a community standpoint, the costs don't stop there. Cities and counties across Alabama spend millions responding to homelessness, not on solutions, but on emergency services. Police calls, ambulance runs, ER visits, and jail bookings all add up fast. These are reactive measures, not proactive investments. And they're draining public resources that could be used more effectively elsewhere. Think about it. Every dollar spent responding to a crisis could have gone toward prevention, toward supportive housing, job training, or addiction recovery programs. It's like constantly putting out fires without ever fixing the faulty wiring. There's also the effect on neighborhoods. When homelessness rises, so do concerns about safety and cleanliness. Businesses worry about foot traffic, tourism declines, and property values take a hit. Tension grows, and communities start to feel fractured. People start to avoid certain areas, and instead of addressing the root causes, they push the problem away, out of sight, out of mind. But the truth is, these issues don't stay contained. When homelessness grows, it becomes part of the community's identity, something that shapes how people view their city and how residents feel about where they live. And yet, too often, the response is to criminalize homelessness instead of addressing it. People are fined for sleeping in public, moved from place to place, or even jailed for acts of survival. That approach doesn't solve the problem, it just shifts it around while wasting time, money, and lives. So, what's the way forward? It starts with empathy, but it can't stop there. Alabama needs long-term strategies that address the full scope of this crisis. That means building more affordable housing, expanding mental health care, and rethinking how we support people before they reach the brink. Because the longer we wait, the harder it will be to rebuild what's been lost. Homelessness may begin with one person, but its impact belongs to all of us. The question now is, what kind of community do we want to be? Homelessness in Alabama is not just a passing crisis. It's a long-standing problem that requires real, sustained solutions. While the road ahead is filled with challenges, there are strategies in place that are starting to make a difference. If we act collectively and with urgency, change is possible. One of the most effective approaches showing promise is the Housing First model. It's not a new idea, but it's finally gaining traction in Alabama. At its core, Housing First turns the traditional model on its head. Instead of requiring people to deal with addiction, mental health, or unemployment before they can get housing, it gives them a stable place to live first. The logic is simple. When people have a roof over their heads, they can focus on healing, job training, and rebuilding their lives. This approach has worked in other parts of the country and is starting to take hold in Alabama too. But Housing First isn't a fix-all, it's just one part of the puzzle. Local organizations in cities like Birmingham are stepping up, offering everything from meals and temporary shelter to mental health support, addiction treatment, and employment assistance. These groups are the backbone of the fight against homelessness, but they're stretched thin. Shelters are almost always full. Food pantries often run out of supplies, and the funding available doesn't match the growing need. That leaves us asking a hard question. How can we serve those in need when the resources simply aren't enough? Although Alabama has increased funding for homelessness programs, the money often doesn't reach far enough. The issue goes beyond temporary fixes. It's rooted in systemic problems. Rising rent prices are putting more families at risk of eviction. The state's supply of affordable housing is nowhere near what's needed. And for those dealing with mental illness or addiction, treatment centers are few and far between. Even when a person is lucky enough to get into a shelter, what comes next? Without access to long-term housing, healthcare, and employment opportunities, the cycle starts all over again. So where do we go from here? The path ahead is clear. If we want to make a real dent in homelessness across Alabama, we need to come together. This isn't a job for one group alone. It's going to take serious collaboration between the state government, local communities, and nonprofit organizations. The government must step up with increased funding for affordable housing, mental health care, and addiction recovery services. Communities need to continue backing shelters and support programs that offer food, safety, and a path forward. And every single one of us has a role to play, whether it's volunteering, donating, or pushing for policies that get to the root of the problem. Because let's be honest, if we keep throwing Band-Aid fixes at this crisis, we'll never see real progress. Emergency shelters help, yes, but one night indoors isn't the same as long-term stability. People need real opportunities. That means access to housing they can afford, mental health support, addiction treatment, and job training that gives them a shot at a new life. So we have to ask ourselves, are we truly prepared to invest in long-term solutions, or are we going to keep chasing our tails with short-term patches? If we keep putting this off, the problem will only grow. But if we act now with compassion and commitment, we can break this cycle for good. This isn't just about statistics. It's about lives, about families, about dignity. The power to change things is right in front of us. The only question is, will we take it? The truth is, every time we ignore this crisis, we send a message that some lives matter less. But if we respond with urgency and unity, we can create a future where no one in Alabama is forced to sleep outside. The choice is ours. Let's make it count. When you see someone sleeping on the streets, it's easy to turn away. But if you take a moment to look closer, you'll see that behind every tent, every cardboard sign, is a story worth telling. And some of those stories are turning toward hope, thanks to the efforts of people and programs that refuse to give up. Take Sarah, for example. She's a 5-year-old single mother from Montgomery who lost her job after the retail store she worked at shut down. Within weeks, she couldn't keep up with her rent. She and her young son ended up at a crowded shelter sharing a room with 2 other families. But thanks to a local Housing First program, things began to shift. Sarah was placed in a small but stable apartment. With a door she could lock and a bed for her son, she started to rebuild. She enrolled in a job training course and found part-time work. Her son was able to return to daycare. The difference? She had a foundation to build on. Stories like Sarah's show that our efforts, whether big or small, can have a powerful impact. There are many ways we can all help, starting with donations. Local shelters rely heavily on community support. Whether it's food, clothing, hygiene products, or financial gifts, every donation makes a difference in someone's life. These aren't faceless numbers, they're people trying to survive. Volunteering is another way to create meaningful change. Local shelters and food banks are always in need of extra hands. You can help serve meals, sort donated items, or support job readiness workshops. It's a way to connect with those experiencing homelessness and offer more than just material support. You're giving them a sense of dignity and community. Advocacy is just as crucial. Contact your state representatives. Sign petitions that push for better housing policies. Attend local meetings where decisions are being made about public housing or shelter zoning. Every time you speak up, you're helping push the issue to the front of the line. Supporting programs that offer job training, financial literacy, and transitional housing is another step forward. These services don't just solve an immediate problem, they help people gain long-term independence. They teach budgeting, resume building, and interview skills. They prepare people not just to survive, but to thrive. We also need to raise awareness. Share stories like Sarah's, educate others on how systemic issues like lack of affordable housing, low wages, and limited healthcare access contribute to homelessness. The more we talk about it, the harder it becomes to ignore. Some people believe homelessness is a result of laziness or bad choices, but that narrative couldn't be more wrong. For most, homelessness happens after a job loss, medical crisis, or family breakdown. It can happen to anyone. And that's why this fight belongs to all of us. If we all step up through donating, volunteering, and advocating, we can change the outcome. We can turn the tide. We can create a future where people like Sarah don't fall through the cracks. Homelessness in America is not just a national issue. It's local and it's personal. If we act now with heart and with purpose, we can make it a thing of the past in Alabama. The question isn't whether we can make a difference. The question is, will we choose to? 6, conclusion. Homelessness isn't just a problem for a few, it's a reflection of who we are as a society. In Alabama and across the country, this crisis goes beyond shelter. It's about restoring dignity, rebuilding lives, and making sure no one is left behind. The street shouldn't be anyone's home. The time to step up is now, before more lives slip through the cracks. This is on all of us, and it's time we take responsibility.